I'm really surprised that there are so many people in here because this is the last session and you're probably all tired from the 2 days of intense talks and last night party, probably. My name is Olga, and I'm a lead UX designer at World of Tanks Blitz in a very small company named Wargaming. And today I would like you to take on the journey of designing the user experience in our game. And when I tell people here at the conference throughout these 2 days, I'm a UX designer, but like, okay. So I hope you are all familiar with the term and what I do and what our people do. And I will share with you the story of starting from nothing and going into a huge AAA project that turned out to be a huge success. And I will share lots of tips and tricks. And we've learned those tips and tricks the bad way, and I don't want you to learn them the bad way. And that's why I would like to share all this information with you. So let's start with the App Store. This is the most desired thing for all the mobile developers, is to get to the top ranks. This is like the holy grail, to get into the top of grossing. Oh boy, we all want that. And I do believe that a strong teamwork of so many departments like marketing, PR, publishing, producing, game design and user experience, development, analytics, all those people make your game get into this top. But the most important part that is missing on this picture is players. Because players actually get you into this top. If you don't get enough installs, or if you don't build up your loyal audience, your game is nothing. So people don't really care, your players don't really care if you've spent $10 million on marketing, or if you've hired 20 most talented game designers in the world. If they cannot download your game from Appstore, if they cannot install it on their phone, if it's glitchy or buggy, they will hate it. If the user experience is incoherent, broken, or inconsistent, they just won't simply play it. So today I'll tell you about our journey, what we've learned about our players, who they really are, what they like. I'll tell you about some insights on using classical user experience techniques to build up a coherent user experience on mobile. And I will share major lessons that we've learned throughout this amazing journey. So when you're starting designing your game, you usually know very little about your players. I mean, you get all the data. In our case, we had the big version of the game, the desktop version, so we got all the data from them. We got some analytics from business intelligence, and we've built personas. We had everything good on paper, but could we really imagine who our players are and what their behavior would be on mobile? Because this was a very unknown territory for us. So we decided to stop and just observe. So we've started with ideas. By the way, these are not our game designers. I googled this picture. This is what our game designers look like. No, I'm joking. It's just nap time. So I'll put up a better picture of game designers. We've started with lots of concepts on documentation and just throwing ideas in the pot, designing stuff for several days or weeks, and just testing it and observing how people would interact with the product. What would their expectations of the product be? How would they want to hold the device? Just simple as that. And at first, our prototypes were very simplistic. This is one of the very first prototypes. You don't see fancy controls. You don't see fancy positioning. There is no transition or beauty in it. But it's not necessary at this stage. At this stage, we wanted to know, is it comfortable for people to hold the device this way? What parts of their body they're going to use to maneuver the tank or to shoot or to heal the crew? And we cared, at this point, we cared about the feedback from actual players, and oh boy, did we get it. We've tested several joystick versions. We've tried to test the gyroscope maneuvering of the vehicle, but to save you all the time, if you want to micromanage the vehicle, it's impossible to do with tilting the device, so don't even try it. The flower button was a really good idea on paper because user experience people love flower buttons because it's very concise and very built up with in the human mind. So it's very easy to use for people, but in practice, it turned out to be a terrible way of putting the controls. And after having observed lots of people do weird stuff to our game, like one of the players actually, during the play test, took off his shoes and started to maneuver the tank with his feet. So you learn that people do weird stuff with their game. And the crucial outcome was that in our game, people would expect the iPad to be in a landscape position. This is the most comfortable position for them. They would also expect controls to be right under their both thumbs. And at that point, we decided that this is where we start off. This is what we know about our players. This is the most comfortable for them, and that's how we're going to design our whole interface around it. Now we had some knowledge. What do we do next? We knew that players enjoyed playing the game, and game designers started building up some concepts and features, and we had to start working on our very first prototypes. This is one of the very first prototypes I made, very girly-like, but it turned out to be terrible because we tested it and it was just really bad. It was impossible to grow functionalities on top of this layout. It was interfering with the native and with the iOS functionalities that are built in iOS, so we could not use that. And we've entered the vicious circle of prototyping, testing, making observations, correcting our mistakes, and then going into prototyping again and watching people use our games. This is one of the high-definition prototypes that we've tested on players, and this is very interesting. So we've created this interactive prototype. We've set up several testing teams throughout several realms. And we took very experienced mid-core to hardcore players who are very experienced on mobile and gave them this prototype. And we thought it was awesome. I mean, the icons look really nice. The interface was lightweight. It was not overwhelming. We were shocked that experienced players would not understand what this golden cup means. We thought it was clear that this is achievements. They thought it was leaderboards. They could not decipher what the newspaper meant or what two crossed swords means. And at that point, again, we realized that we're not making game for ourselves. We're not making game for a Russian realm, or we're not making games for people who are familiar with the game. We're making a game for everyone. Well, not everyone, but for our target audience, but people in China, people in America, people in New Zealand, for people everywhere. So we have to do something about it. And we decided to introduce text. And we learned the hard way that text is the best icon. And by the time we were finished with our very first solid prototype and we've tested it, we've learned a lot, we figured out that there are so many functionalities that we cannot simply fit them in to an iPhone 4, which was our starting device. So we decided to use a very classical user experience tool, which is called building. In this case, we were rebuilding the information architecture. So we've started with iPhone 4, and our game designers wanted us to fit in tank tree, player profile, news, notifications, ammunition, achievements, battle, and all this other stuff that would not simply fit in an iPhone 4. So we had to do something. We had to reorganize and rearrange stuff so it makes sense for players, not for us. We want to build up functionalities that are logical for people and for players, but not, again, for us and game designers. So we decided to start fresh. We've cleaned out the screen, and we reviewed all the videos and all the data that we've gathered throughout this whole testing, and we figured out, if we're making a game about tanks, players need a tank list. They need a tank list to choose from. They also need to upgrade their vehicle before they go into battle because they want to perform better. They want to equip their tank with various things. They also want to train the crew so that the crew maneuvers the tank better. We also want to introduce the shop. Well, this is both for us and for players. We want to sell, players want to buy. We want to introduce socialization on the main screen. We'll also want to introduce our premium monetization item, which is premium account. And we want people to go into battle. And the rest, we thought, is less relevant for a player, and that's why we should hide it. And basically, that's what we did. This is the current version of our hangar and of our interface. On the left side, you see the sidebar, and we've hidden all of the less relevant information for the player into the sidebar. All of the important stuff is still located on the main screen. It's just so you can see it better. I'll show you a very mock-up-y version of an information architecture just to give you the idea. Why is it useful to build it in your game, and how can you use it to grow functionalities in your game? So this is a very simplified version of our information architecture. It could not actually, the actual information architecture would not fit onto the screen because it's so huge. But you can see that there are colors and levels. We're considering that there are two primary things in our game, which is hangar, pre-battle lobby, and HUD, right? And everything that happens in between, this is less important, right? We also have battle, which we consider to be the most important thing for a player, because this is where he gets the fun. This is how he gets to the HUD. And store, that's the most important thing for us, right? The rest is colored in gray. This is the third level of importance, and white is the fourth level of importance. The way it can help you review your information architecture is say, do I think that missions are too far? Is it less important than crew? Or is crew more important than chat? Or if you're trying to understand how far the words are from the player, you can say it's very far. And you should hide it there for a reason. It should not be hidden there just because you don't have enough space. There should be reasoning behind it, and you should sit down with your game designers to say, okay, so you want to introduce battle missions into our game. How important compared to other functionalities it is. So when you weigh everything in, it makes it easier for you to make the design change decisions. We've also incorporated a lot of cognitive psychology principles into our user experience design, because we try to make sure that we use the best of user attention, memory, peripheral vision, regular focused vision in our game. Like, for example, we try to drive users' attention to the main thing on the screen, which is the vehicle, the tank, right? The tricky thing in here is that there are so many things around it that your attention just starts flying around. So what we do, we introduce animation. After a certain period of time, when people got used to the whole interface, we start rotating the vehicle. And the way it works is that your peripheral vision catches this animation, and no matter what your vision, where your attention was before, it's instantly dragged to this moving vehicle. And it's not moving too fast, just because if it were moving too fast, you would be either dizzy or it would irritate you. It's just slow enough to catch your attention. We've also used color triggers to direct players' attention. This is a very interesting topic because not that many people are that interested in coloring, especially in mobile games. Sometimes coloring is just awful. We did a lot of research on that topic, and because we were considering lots of colors, I'm going to show you later on our first prototypes. We were considering lots of coloring, and we wanted the whole theme of the interface to be still military, because we're making a game about tanks. So we want the interface to support this theme that we're making a game about tanks. But we wanted players' attention to still focus on one thing is tank, another thing is go into battle. We don't want you to pay attention to anything else. You just can go straight into the battle and just have some fun. We thought of making it red, and it turned out that people are scared of red. I don't know, this is not a new thing. Everybody knows that. But you would think that the first association with a military game is red, war, red. But if you test it, like, would you press a red button in an elevator? Probably not. So why would you press a red button in a game to launch the action? You wouldn't, right? So that's why we chose orange. And orange is a very yummy color. You want to press it. It looks very seductive. So people are very tempted. And also it's quite bright enough in contrast to other interface parts that you want to press it first. Second trigger color that drags your attention is shop. So we made it deliberately muted green. So this is the second place where your attention would go. First, it focuses on the orange, then it goes to green. And this is the prototype I talked before, the icons, and the coloring on this was just off. You see the red button, and you would never guess that this icon actually means battle, right? It means something different. So it would be a lot more difficult for people from other countries to actually understand what they're supposed to do without any tutorial, right? And the coloring was just not working, especially with the combination of blue and red. They're too contrasting, and your attention just starts spinning around. You don't understand what you need to press. And we decided that this color scheme, and especially the lightness, if you see that all the backgrounds for the buttons at the top are quite transparent, this is a very good design solution because you want to make your interface lightweight. But apparently this is not what people expect from a military game. They don't expect interface in a military game to be lightweight and transparent and flat. They don't. They just simply want to see some bluish, grayish colors that are associated with steel. We're also trying to follow the Magic 7 rule. Has anybody heard of it? Oh, so few. Okay, then I'm going to briefly talk you through. This is, again, the cognitive psychology principle. Is the way that human memory works is that we can only keep 7 items in our memory, at least in our short-term memory. Of course, if we train, we go back to the interface, we can remember more. But when your player launches the game for the very first time and you have 35 buttons on the main screen, he's going to be overwhelmed just because his brain cannot process this much information. So we're always trying to keep this rule in mind and try to not overload the main screen, not to overload the working memory of a person who's playing our game. Every book on UX would tell you that if you want to build a coherent user experience, you should definitely go native. Native here, I mean native to the platform. When you're building interaction with your game, it's always good to go native. iOS has lots of user researches, and they test everything before they launch it. So it's always good to follow their recipes and guidelines. But I'm going to give you not a very good example of going native. We decided to incorporate a native iOS control in our currency conversion screen. And we borrowed it from a GarageBand, and it seemed awesome. I mean, really awesome control. It allows users to manage the input in 3 ways. First way is when you touch on a number, the keyboard pops up, and you can manually input the number. Second, you can use just tapping on the arrows to micromanage the number, and you can tap, hold, and scroll up or down to macromanage the number. On paper, it looked like the best UX control ever. But when, during testing, I saw people interacting with this control, I was not so happy. Because what people do is they're not familiar with this control. They don't know what to do with it. Would you know what to do with it? Probably you would start doing what everybody does, is just tapping. And when their task is to tap 2,344, this turns into a nightmare. What happens next is that their finger slides into the tap zone and the keyboard pops up. And that's how they learn how to interact with this control. Very few people understand that you can tap, scroll up and down to actually macro manage the number. So always think it through and take the guidelines with a pinch of salt. When players begin their user experience journey in your game, they always try to figure out what is the practical value. It's not necessarily about games, it's also about apps, if you're making not a game and an app. But when they launch your game, they try to figure out how difficult it is going to be. How many resources, meaning brain resources, is going to take for me to learn this game. So they're trying to figure out how much fun it is and how difficult it is going to be for my brain to deal with this fun, right? So if in your game there is too much text, meaning you're taking a lot of brain capacity for reading the text, which people don't do, so people don't read text on mobile, or if you're making them input a lot of information, or if you're playing around with their attention too much, you're distracting them all over, it's getting too overwhelming, and the practical value will be lowering and lowering and lowering. So the fun part might not be as important anymore, right? So maybe it's not great to put and create an account screen in front of players when they haven't seen the game yet, right? Especially with CAPTCHA. Have you seen CAPTCHA on mobile for the creation of the account? No, probably this is not a great idea. But I'll tell you why we did it. This is what game designers gave us. This is the login scheme, login into the game scheme. This is how people are supposed to log into the game. No living person would suffer through that to enter the game without knowing what the game is about, right? So we've learned the hard way by dropping numbers that this is not a very good solution. So what we have to do everything on the background. It's very difficult to do it because we're an online game. We cannot not register people when they're starting playing, otherwise they will lose their progress, which is really bad for their player experience. But the way of doing it on the background is when we're showing the candy up front, we're showing, oh my god, look, the action is really cool. You can shoot tanks, you can drive this huge vehicle. We show them the fun, and then we make them give us something in return. So it's always good to give something up front. And this has dramatically improved our numbers in terms of players who actually go through that and register in the game. So don't put walls in front of people without giving them the candy. Very often when business people want to improve numbers, they go to marketing, game design, monetization team. Never they go to UX. So I'm going to tell you how some UX decisions can improve conversions. Our primary monetization item is premium account. Premium account allows people to earn twice more credits and experience in battle. And you can purchase it for as many days as you want. The top is 360. And we wanted to push monetization without being too pushy. I hate it when games push monetization. It just drives me away. I don't want to buy it if you push it straight into my face. So we did a lot of research, and we've decided to do it a very different way. This is the battle results screen. This is when a player has finished playing a battle, and he sees this screen. Basically, it tells him how well he performed during this battle. And this player has performed outstandingly. This gold medal that you see, Master, it's very difficult to get, extremely difficult. For some reason, we know that this player does not have a premium account, but he's done an amazing job. He is definitely proud of himself because you see how many medals he got. It's really rare to do that. So we use that to offer him premium account. But we don't do it in a way, oh, you've done a great job, buy premium account. We use positive emotions of player. He's on his highest peak because he just brutally killed 7 tanks. He is so happy and proud of himself. We're saying, we're happy for you. You've done an amazing job, excellent job. And for that outstanding performance, we give you a bonus. A bonus is actually a 50% discount premium account. But we also allow him to double his winnings on that battle post-mortem. So he is happy. And he sees that we appreciate him being the best player in this battle. So we tell him, please, get our bonus. And this has improved conversion dramatically. So using people's emotions can help you change your monetization, not to be too pushy, but be appropriate and very targeted to your player behavior. So now I would like to shortly talk to you about other lessons that we've learned, again, the hard way, and maybe it will help you to avoid them in the future. Well, everybody's familiar with the game loop. Because it was so difficult, we had so many functionalities and the mechanics were so complex, we were putting a lot of blocking screens in between action reward and new content. And this was a big mistake because you should never do that. The fewer screens you get in between, the best, because people don't care if you need to sell stuff. If you get him lost at the reward to new content level, they will never be exposed to that new content again just because you've put too many screens in front of him. He's lost. He doesn't want to continue playing the game because he was in the loop of fun. He was happy, or maybe not happy, maybe he died 5 times, but he wanted to stay in this game action loop. But you dragged him out of it and said, oh, read about our new premium account. This is so awesome. He doesn't want that. He doesn't want that. He wants to stay in this loop. So keep this loop very, very, very tight. Spend a lot of time on tutorial. If you're making a mobile game with very complex mechanics, spend a very, very, very long time on your tutorial. We've had lots of issues with the tutorial because how do you explain, I don't know, a housewife what's a turret? Well, maybe she doesn't know what's a turret. So we had to rethink our whole idea of making a tutorial. We thought it was okay to show the whole interface and just highlight, okay, this is chat. Oh, this is battle. When you press it, you go into battle. Or this is equipment. You need your equipment to equip your tank before the battle. And this turned out to be too much because our interface is a bit overwhelming. And when people see a lot of controls, they perceive your game as very complex. This is their initial perception. Too many controls? Oh, that's too complex. Delete. And that's where you lost your player. So what we're doing, we're not doing a tutorial as it is. We're showing everything gradually. And we take people to battle as much as possible because this is where the fun is. They don't care about your interface. So you have to introduce it very slowly and gradually while they're playing and still enjoying the game. And try not to make it very long. And we've tested that. It's very interesting when you test your tutorial and you see people, the light in their eyes just dies because they're so bored of going through your tutorial. You have to time it depending on the game. Of course, you would have to time it yourself. I would say if it's over 12 minutes, it's far too long. Even if it's action tutorial, if you're taking people into the combat, more than 12 minutes, don't go over it. Always provide content for non-paying and paying players. And I don't mean content as it is, but valuable content. I've seen this a lot of times where people push monetization and start selling stuff to win or to help people win better. People don't appreciate it. Our game is a game of skill. And when people master this skill, they value it that much that if we introduce something that is going to allow other people with less skill perform better, it's going to ruin their loyalty. So by providing value for both non-paying and paying customers, players, we actually build up a much, much loyal audience. Be happy with your player. We're trying to be as happy for our player as we can be. Get an animation team, a sound team, make a big deal out of his achievements, because people, when they achieve in your game, they're happy. And if you're not happy with them, what's the point of that, right? So introduce a lot of sound, color, flying around fireworks, everything you can possibly to show people that you've done something great. And we appreciate it. We know that you've done something great. This makes people strive for achievement even more. Try to deliver fresh content as often as possible. Just because mobile players have become very hungry. At first, they were hungry for something fresh and new as an idea. Now they're hungry for fresh content. Like if you're making a game and you're releasing an update every 3 to 4 months, there's a great chance that you're going to lose half of your audience in between just because somebody made a clone of your game and just popped out with something new. And people are going to switch to a fresher and newer things. So in our game, we try to deliver new content every month. Either it's a new feature or just new content like new tanks, new maps. Always remember that your user experience, players' user experience, does not start when they launch your game. Their user experience starts when they see your game on the App Store. It starts with the icon. Do they understand what your game is about, judging by the icon? I would strongly suggest to do A/B testing on icon, on screenshots, on videos, and on text that you write in the description. It's a very common perception among the developers that people don't read text. They actually do on the App Store. They don't expand it, though, so don't bother writing this much. But the first 2 lines are very important, because this is when people make judgment. Are they going to play your game or not? Always remember that you might be localized in many countries. This is a very difficult lesson for us, because when we designed the UX, we never expected our game to be translated into 18 languages. And we thought, well, that's not a big deal, right? It turned out to be a huge deal, because even if your layout looks fine in English or in Russian or in Finnish, it looks terrible in Arabic. And when your whole interface is not designed to people perceiving text from the other side, there's a huge problem. So what we do now is that we always leave enough, when we design our interface, we always leave enough space, like 40%, for it being localized, and maybe in German it's 300 letters. And in Arabic, what we do when we design special Arabic interface. So we invert everything so that people don't have to deal with bad looking stuff, like the text is inverted, but the icon is still at the same spot, or the button is, I don't know, on the wrong side. It's not logical for Arabic people to, I don't know, to see everything that is in our alignment, but just translate it into their language. Always remember about the guidelines. This is what I've talked about. This is one of the guidelines that iOS, that the Apple give you, is that don't put walls in front of your content. This was so obvious, right? So iOS tells you don't enter the calculator when you're making a calculator. So why, when you're making a game, you would put login walls in front of people? Just show them the game. So we've learned the hard way that they're not general guidelines for programmers. They're actually guidelines for designers, for UX designers. So it's very good to actually dig into them. Always remember about the hardware peculiarities of the platform. When we were designing one of our versions of the prototype, we saw that iOS came out with the control center, and it was sliding out from the sides. And one of our ideas was to hide half of the functionalities on the slide bars. And at that point, we knew this is a bad idea, because this is going to interfere with the system, and the system is always going to win. So remember about the hardware peculiarities. And the back button in Android, because we started designing for iOS and then moved to Android, it was very difficult for us to actually link the back button to all the existing back navigation system in our game. So think beforehand when you're designing or developing your game that you might want to consider going cross-platform, and this might cause an issue. So if your goal is to make the best App Store game, you should always know who your players are. See them for yourselves. Don't make a game for yourself. Make a game for your players. See what they really like, how they behave. Always keep in mind the cognitive psychology principles. Don't put walls in front of people because they don't like that. Explain in-game mechanics in a very easy and enjoyable way. Celebrate with them. Be happy. Deliver fresh content and provide value for paying and non-paying players. And trust the platform guidelines because they never lie. And this was an amazing journey for us, and it has taught us a lot. And I hope that this whole journey will teach you how to avoid those mistakes and to make your game get into the best App Store game of 2015. That's it. Thank you very much. So it's, I'm a bit early, but it's question time, so I'm hoping some people have questions. Questions? Oh, there's the question over there. Oh, there's a
microphone coming.
So you were first saying that in the main screen, when you said on the first screen you wanted to bring the player attention to the tank, that's why you moved it. I wonder, why did you want to bring a player's attention to a tank? Because it seemed to me like if I'm exploring the UI, then it would take my attention away. And I wonder if you can say why you decided to do that. Was it based on player feedback or some analytics or just opinion? Or?
Well, that's a great question. And the thing is that the main reason why people come to play a tank game is because they're excited about a tank. So everything else is irrelevant. There is a core thing in our game, which is tanks and various models and various nations of tanks. We want to show it up front. We want people to see how detailed the models are, how good they look. The tanks are very sexy. So we want people to pay attention to the sexy stuff that we have to offer. But we also want them to say, okay, so you saw the tank. Do you want to play this tank? Now press battle and go into battle. So this was the logic behind it. So we want people to see the focal object and then move on to the battle. We don't want them to care about the rest of the interface that much. If people want to explore your interface, they will eventually. If they really want to find something, they will. It's our job to make it as easy as possible, and that's it. Anybody else? Oh, there's a question over there.
I saw you did paper prototyping. Do you do wireframing, and do you use any tools to do that as part of your prototyping process?
Well, it depends what the purpose is. We do, but we only do that for concepts. We paper prototype for concepts because we want to see how they work and we want to get the initial feedback. But for actual feedback from the players, the more real you get it to them, the better real experience they're going to show you. So we're trying to make them as realistic as possible, so we use lots of tools to do that. So for wireframing, we do it on paper, just drawing on paper. For interactive stuff, there are so many. At the moment, I'm using Marvel. So it's very easy to use, but very effective on showing the coherent experience. That's it. Oh, there's a question over there.
Oh. So the
the slide where you came up with the two-thumb idea on both sides, and that's basically the scheme for combat part of the game, but in the user interface where the player does the management, you kind of losing that scheme. So basically, is the idea that for managing stuff, basically browsing through tanks, buying things, upgrading, you use a different model where the player puts the iPad, for example, on the table and just browses with the right hand as a book, because the battle button is at the top and you cannot reach that with the thumb?
The thing is about battle button, about the whole positioning using fingers, is that what we've noticed over time is that when people are stressed out, when they're trying to shoot somebody, the most convenient for them is to hold the device this way. Because, you know, when you're getting very into the moment and excited, you tend to squeeze, right? So when people are... There are some people who use their, other fingers to maneuver the tank or to shoot. But the most common is two thumbs. Whereas in Hangar, in the lobby, there is a huge possibility of making a mistake when you're using your thumb, when you're just browsing through whatever you're browsing through. And we want to make it a conscious decision to go into battle. That's why it's that far away. And you have to actually take your hand and make this decision. Because when we're doing testing with this button under your right thumb, there are so many misclicks that people would just simply press it. Because especially when men have huge hands, they might not even see it. So with other functionalities, we've put a lot of testing into that. And their whole positioning is the most expected position of things in player's head. Anybody else? Oh, there's another question.
You only focused on the positive reaction for the player achievements. But what about the situations when the player loses? Most of the times in mobile gaming, they try to show him that, oh, you are not so bad, you can watch this ad and you can play again, and so on. And what's your approach to this?
This is a very interesting question, by the way. And this is what we're looking into at the moment. I'm digging out a lot of research on positive and negative emotions and how people would behave when they experience both. But as you know, people experience a lot more pain when they lose. And the behavior could be very controversial. You could never predict. Very often people, when they lose in our game, depending on the series, they just quit the game. They don't want to buy anything. They don't want to buy another upgrade, or they don't want to buy another consumable to kick ass. Because they're so upset, they want to just forget about it. And that's the most common behavior. So I would have to dig up on that a little bit more and then maybe tell you next time we see each other. But at the moment, we're trying not to go into that because negative emotions are a lot more powerful. So you have to be a lot more careful to deal with them.
Thanks for the answer.
All right, so regarding that container that you talked about during the first part of the presentation, that you said was kind of misleading for the users because they didn't know where to tap, the tool about the micromanagement where you actually set up the... All right, so you also mentioned the importance of having tutorials where you have like misleading or very complex features. How about just adding a micro tutorial just for that feature? Like a small, pointing finger that does this next to the container. And you only display that the first time when you visit that screen, and afterwards you don't. And that way you're sure that the user gets the functionality.
It's, again, a really good question. But where do you stop? Where do you stop showing tutorial? If we think that people would not guess how to interact with a button, eventually they all do. If you have the intent to interact with something, you will find the way, because we've all been lured to just tap wherever, and something will happen. And do you show a tutorial for other buttons? We don't. We show it. It's the most complex button we have. Why do we make an exception for this one? And also, we're trying not to explain things that are quite easy for understanding. Maybe for some people they're not, but other people, if you tell them, I don't know, if you explain to people how to eat, they will feel stupid. People don't like feeling stupid. So we're trying not to overdumb it, but like keep the tutorial about the game and the game mechanics, not how to interact with the interface. Because they will learn how to interact with the interface. There are people who learn how to interact with crappy interface, where there is like buttons everywhere and it's like flashing. Look at Chinese games. People are fine with those. Everything is flashing. Buttons are all colors of the rainbow, and they still learn and manage to play it. Or kids. So, I don't know. I think it's making people feel dumb. So. Okay, we can talk about it later. There's another question over there.
Hey, I'm Nick.
Hi.
So here's a question. So you mentioned that you're doing A/B testing for your screenshots, icons, and stuff like that. And the question is, do you do that just before release, or you're doing that constantly when you're doing updates or something?
We're doing it constantly because there is a huge debate over icons. We have an enormous amount of designers, and you know, designers have their own perception of the world. And I'm also a designer. I don't necessarily enjoy our icon that much, but this is what people chose. This is what people expect our game to look like, and that's what we should do. We don't do it very often, so we obviously did it before the launch, but we still keep doing that. We keep upgrading the icon because people change and the market changes a lot, and you have to be on the edge always. So I would definitely recommend doing that, I don't know, at least like 2-3 times a year. Any more questions? Okay, thank you very much. You were a lovely audience, and yeah, have a safe flight back home.